Photoshop makes it easy to create a single composition out of multiple images. Here's how. When you record a high contrast scene, your camera may not be able to record pleasing highlights and shadows in the same exposure. When that happens, Photoshop can help. Let's open our Chapter 13 folder, and we're going to select two files, Grass 01 and Grass 02. Hold the Shift key to select multiple files. And I'd like to see both of these in separate documents. So up in our application bar, we're going to simply select Tile All in Grid from this Arrange Windows icon. I'll reduce the size of this one a bit and do the same thing here. And you can see what our problem is. With the image on the right, we've got a nice rendering of the subject, but the background is a little bit too bright, and the opposite result in the image on the left. What we're going to do is combine these images into a single document and merge the best elements of each. We're going to select the Move tool. Now you can do this temporarily with a keyboard shortcut. It's Control on the PC, Command on the Mac. Click on this Grass 02 file, and we're going to drag it over into this first image and hold the Shift key. This will ensure that the images are perfectly aligned. Let's close this Grass 02. We don't need this anymore. And because I held down the Shift key, if I toggle this top layer off and on, you can see that the images are perfectly aligned. Let's change the names here, give them something a little bit more descriptive. I'll double click on the background layer. That's our dark layer, and let's call this one Light. What we'd like is for our subject to remain as it is in this light layer, but to pull in a lot of the background from this dark layer. To do that, we're going to need to add a layer mask. So at the bottom of the Layers channel, we're going to select Add Layer Mask. We have a white layer mask there. And what we're going to do is draw a gradient on this layer mask. We're going to select the Gradient tool in the Tools panel. The keyboard shortcut is G. I want you to verify up in the Options bar that you have this third icon selected. This is our black to white gradient. Very important. Also make sure that to the right you've selected our linear gradient icon. It's the very first choice here. Now we're going to be painting from black to white. So I'm going to start not quite at the top of the image because I'd like this top sliver to be completely black on the layer mask. I'm going to click, hold down the Shift key to constrain my drawing to a straight line, and I'll release it just as I get to about the eyebrow. And there we go. You can see that at the top of the image, we've allowed that bottom layer to show through. Now we can still modify this. If we want to fix some of these areas here in the grass and make those a little darker, we can simply paint on this mask in addition to our gradient. So let's select the Brush tool. And I want you to verify that you have a hardness set to 0. We need a nice feathered edge for this brush. I want to paint with black, so look in the Tools panel at the bottom. Make sure that your foreground color is set to black. If it is set to white, simply click that double bent arrow. If you're seeing a completely different set of colors here, press the letter D on your keyboard. That'll take you back to your black and white default chips. And we're going to paint not at 100% opacity because remember the gradient starts at full strength and ends at 0. So we want to find a reasonably good match somewhere in this area. We'll choose, let's see, we'll click on opacity and try 45%. And now let's just paint. That's a pretty nice match right there. Taking care not to spill over on our subject. We're getting a nice subtle result that is realistic and believable. And there we go. We've combined the best elements of both of these layers. If I turn off this dark layer, you can see exactly what we've done. That's the amount of the light layer that's being hidden by the mask, allowing the dark layer below to show through. Stitching images together to create a panorama or simply a higher resolution file is a fun way to create striking photographs, and Photoshop makes it super easy. Let's go to our Chapter 13 folder, and we're going to select 3 files. 3-shot pano A, B, and C. Again, with the Shift key, we can select those contiguous files and hit Open. I'd like to start with these files in their own document windows, so we're going to go up to our Arrange Windows menu and select Tile Vertical. We've got 3 separate shots looking across at the Ponte Vecchio in Florence, and what we'd like to do is blend them seamlessly into a single image. To manually blend these files, I'd have to create a large canvas, drag in each image, align them along the edges, and hope that everything matched up. Too much work. Instead, we're going to use Photo Merge. In the File menu, down under Automate, select Photo Merge. And we're going to leave the layout set to auto, and under Source Files, we're simply going to tell Photoshop to add open files. This adds the files that are currently on our screen. Blend images together, we want to have that checked. This will avoid any seams along our edges. Vignette removal and geometric distortion are handy tools. For this particular image, we don't need to use either, so I'm simply going to hit OK. And now let's check on our result. I'm going to cycle through to full screen mode with menu bar by pressing the F key. And look at this, those 3 separate images have been blended into a single seamless image. All we have to do is crop out the excess. We'll select the crop tool. The shortcut is the letter C. And there we have it, the Ponte Vecchio. What's that, you say? Only a 3-image composite, no big deal? Well, my friend, let's try something a bit more ambitious then. I'm going to close all of these files by going to the File menu and selecting Close All. We don't need to save anything. And we are going back to Photo Merge with no files open. This time we're going to tell Photoshop to look for a folder. We'll click Browse, and let's go to our Chapter 13 folder, and here we have a folder titled Panorama. We'll hit OK. And that folder contains not 1, not 2, not 3, but 13 images. We're about to make a very long panorama. Simply hit OK. Now that is a panorama. I really wish I could give you more information about nitty-gritty details and how hard and difficult it was to create and how much time it would take and how you had to dig into each layer, but it's really this simple. You select Photo Merge. We'll crop this out here. And there we have it, a beautiful panorama. Photoshop makes it easy to convert multiple takes into a single image even when the camera position has changed. Let's start with 2 more images from our Chapter 13 folder. This time we'll choose Align 01 and Align 02. Again, let's pull these into their own document windows. This time I'm going to select the horizontal tile, and I'll bring this one up a bit. Zoom in here as well. Now here's the problem. We've got a shot of these 2 incredibly cute kids, but one is looking at the image in one shot, the other is looking at the image in the other shot. Happens all the time. Here's how we fix it. You might have guessed that we're going to drag these layers into a single document, so I'm going to take this bottom layer, holding down the Control key on the PC, Command key on the Mac to invoke the Move tool. I'm simply going to click and drag, hold the Shift key to align the pixels. And let's get rid of this bottom image now. Now here's our problem. Even though we held down the Shift key to align the pixel dimensions, the camera position has changed in between these 2 photographs. So if I toggle this top layer off, you can see that everything has moved in here. And if we just create a layer mask and start painting out, we're going to have a mess on our hands. So what we need to do is first align these images, and fortunately Photoshop has a tool to do just that. We're going to select both of these layers in the Layers panel, go up to the Edit menu, and select Auto Align Layers. We're going to stay with the default auto option and hit OK. Notice that in the Layers panel, Photoshop automatically converted that background layer. It's now titled Layer 0 and there is no padlock. Now let's see how Photoshop did in aligning these layers. Much better. Now when we toggle off, most of the movement is centered on the children. The chairs and the table are staying nicely in place. Now we're ready to add a layer mask. I'll click on layer 1 to activate it. Click the Add Layer Mask button. Let's go and choose a brush. Again, we want to have a nice feathered edge, so you must be set to a hardness of 0%. Make sure that your foreground color is set to black, 100% opacity, and simply paint over the area that you want to hide. And look at that. Just like magic, we're able to paint out from the top layer, allowing this bottom layer to show through. You can even get rid of his arm over that plate. Change the plate a little bit. The rest of the table matches up nicely. We've got a nice seamless blend here between the layers. No one can tell that we faked it. So if you want to attribute this to your obviously superior photographic skills, feel free. What I'll do is crop out here. We're going to have to take out some areas here off of the top and bottom. But a small price to pay for such a great result. There we go. And if I toggle the top layer on and off, you can see really the only thing moving is the child on the right. Auto Align is a lifesaver with group portraits. Simply take as many shots as you need and you can blend them into one perfect take. Without a doubt, one of the most difficult things to make selections of are soft, fuzzy edges like hair. In CS5, though, we've got a revamped Refine Edges tool that is a huge leap forward. I'm so excited to show you this. Let's open up a file in our Chapter 13 folder. We'll select Hair. Notice in our Layers panel we have 2 layers. What we'd like to do is replace this white layer on which the child was photographed with our layer number 2, this sand. That'll be a much nicer effect. In an earlier chapter, we saw how easy it was to create selections with the Quick Selection tool, so let's start there. The keyboard shortcut is W for this tool. I'm going to increase my brush size significantly. Right bracket key is the shortcut. Now we want to select the child, but in this instance, it's going to be much faster if we select the background. I'm simply going to click and paint, and click and paint again, and now I've got a very rough selection in only 2 clicks. Let's zoom in here on the face and check out what's happening with the hair. I'm going to reduce my brush size. I want to modify my initial selection, so I'm going to hold down the Option key on the Mac, the Alt key on the PC, and simply paint along some of these hair edges. We don't need to include every single strand, but we do want to avoid the dreaded helmet hair. Get this last one down here. That's pretty good for a rough selection. I'll zoom back out. Now keep in mind we selected the background, but what we really want to select is the child. So in the Select menu, we select Inverse. That inverts our selection, and now our child is selected, and now we're ready for our visit to the Refined Edge tool. Now a few things I want to show you here before we get started. The first thing is that we've got a lot of view options here under View mode. We can choose to show the image in its marching ants mode. We can see an overlay. We could view it over black. We could view it over white. But the most useful view when you've already got a bottom layer is to choose the On Layers option. This lets you see your selection directly against the background that you're trying to match it to. We're going to work with this tool by zooming into the image at a 100% view. Very crucial to be able to see exactly what you're doing. And before we get to the hair, I want to focus on the body here. We want to make sure that we've got a good selection around these harder edges. Let's start in the Adjust Edge box. We've got a smooth slider, and right now the edge of his arm is a little bit harsh against that sand, so we're going to bump the smooth slider up maybe to about 5 or 6. That gives us a much more believable and natural edge against that sand. Feathering can be useful. If you need to feather your initial selection here, you can see it's giving us a halo, so we're not going to find that useful in this image. The contrast slider will increase the contrast along your edges, and that we don't want to do. We're actually smoothing those edges. Now, if your initial selection is either too tight or not tight enough, you can use this Shift Edge slider, drag it to the left, and your selection will move inward. Drag it to the right, and your selection moves out. We're pretty good at 0. Now I want to show you the most exciting addition to Refine Edge. It is the Refine Radius tool. This tool is going to allow us to intelligently mask out areas of this top layer. So I'm going to scroll back up here to the hair. I'm going to turn on the Smart Radius box. On an older computer, this may slow you down a bit, but it gives you a much more precise result. I'm going to bump up my radius here to just about 1 pixel. And now what I'm going to do is simply paint over these white areas to allow the bottom layer to show through. And look at that. If you're a retoucher, you've probably just fallen out of your chair. This used to be very, very tedious work that could easily take up the better part of an afternoon, but all I have to do is click and drag with this brush. And Photoshop is automatically noting the difference between the hair and the background and allowing the background to show through to the bottom layer. This is really fantastic. I mean, this feature alone is worth the upgrade to CS5, and if you do any sort of retouching, this will pay for itself the very first time you use it. I'll get this spot down in here, and I'm not really having to be even that precise because Photoshop is doing such a great job of making a distinction between the hair and the white background. Now here's another great new addition to Refine Edge. Right now, all we've done is make a selection. We're seeing a preview of how it would look if it was masked, but right now we just have a selection. Under Output, we can choose whether we want this to remain a selection or to automatically create a layer mask. We could create a brand new layer with or without a layer mask. We could even make a new document that would have this layer mask. Extremely helpful options here. This will speed up your workflow significantly. We are going to choose the layer mask option. I'll point out here we have a Remember Settings button. If you check this, the next time you open Refine Edge, it will have these identical settings. So let's just hit OK. And now you can see we've got a very, very nice selection. It's not 100% perfect. We could do a little touch-up work on that mask, but for a few seconds worth of work, it's pretty phenomenal.